We have launched a new budget-friendly service here at Post and Boost. If you go to postandboost.com/quick start, it is announcing our new service, the turnkey price for as low as $2.99 a month or for $3.49 a month if you're buying it just for a few months and then going month to month. It's the best value we've ever offered. It's for small firms that are looking to start doing something on Facebook, so we're excited to do this. And then the other big project that I'm working on is in July, we have a new book coming out. It's called The Consumer's Journey to Purchasing Funeral Services. This book is teaching me a lot about the funeral industry and about marketing and advertising as it relates to the funeral business. And I'm really excited about what it's going to look like when it's done. This will be releasing in July of this year, and it will be my topic that I'll be speaking on at the NFDA convention in beautiful New Orleans. What we're excited about going to New Orleans this year, it's just a few hours down the road, so we're really pumped about that. Currently, as Jen talked about, we are licensed, we are approved in 7 states, and at the end of today's webinar, I'll be offering you directions on what I need from you to give you the credit that you would like to get. What do you see when you think about the foyer of your funeral home? What picture do you see when you think about the foyer of your funeral home? What picture do you see on the screen in your mind when you think about your main visitation? And what picture do you see on the screen of your mind when you think about your chapel? Well, I know that as we went through each of those items, your foyer, your visitation room, or your chapel, you saw a picture on the screen in your mind. And Dr. William Glasser, who was the late American psychiatrist, he talks about this. He says, we think in pictures and we speak in words. We think in pictures and we speak in words. So the handout that Jen gave you, I encourage you to print that out and use that as a guide for today's presentation. My experience has been that a lot of times that when we do things like this, webinars or seminars, folks promptly forget what we discussed after a week or two. But with this card, if you write down the key thoughts for today's session, you'll be able to remember the big things we talked about a month from now, even a year from now. So we think in pictures, that's the first answer. So this is my question for you. When consumers think about your funeral home or your service, what pictures do they see? Do they see a gimmicky or catchy ad? Or do they see a funeral professional who is totally qualified to meet with families at a time of need? Do they see something that's designed to generate a way of keeping your name out there, like a chocolate day ad? Or do they see a funeral professional in a room where a life can be celebrated? Do they see an image that's just based purely on a price? Or do they see a face of a funeral director who can pre-plan a funeral? What I always worry about is sometimes they don't see a picture at all, and that would be a mistake. So this session that we're talking about today, Busting the Myths of Local Advertising for Funeral Homes, this is designed to give you information to help you invest dollars wisely for increased sales. So thank you for being with me today on this session. It's based on a lot of the content that's in my book, How Facebook Works for Funeral Homes, and a lot of the new content coming up in my new book that will be, of course, The Consumer's Journey to Purchasing Funeral Services. My goal today for each of you is to help you understand how to effectively advertise your funeral home. And a lot of times people get confused by using phrases like social media to describe what we do. But social media is simply the media type that we're using. Today's session is about advertising. The goal is to help you understand how advertising can work so that you can ultimately believe. Can you believe that your funeral home can effectively advertise. That's what the goal is. And we're going to be talking about two media. One is mass media that some people think is legacy, but it's not in all markets. And then the other media is Facebook. And really, we should call it meta because what we've seen a lot, especially in the last year, is how meta has really kind of started to bring Facebook and Instagram into one big idea. Of course, we do want to talk a little bit about the cost of advertising and how to spend your advertising dollars wisely and what media you should use and what media you should ignore. And again, use this card as we go along. I promise you that we will be of value to you a month from now and a year from now. So, what is a myth? A myth, to me, is a commonly believed but false idea. So, we're talking about busting myths, right? We're busting the myths. So, what are some myths that we could talk about that we could point to that fit the funeral industry? Well, the first myth that I've heard a lot is advertising doesn't work for me. And you know this situation. Advertising doesn't work for me. Word of mouth is really our best form of advertising. Well, of course, word of mouth is the best form of advertising. It's also the slowest. What we'll be talking about today is helping you understand how advertising works. If you know how advertising works, then you can see some of the advertising that you may be currently doing and understand why it's not working. And then you can see how you can purchase other advertising that will work. So, we're going to show you how advertising works, and it can work. I mean, if it works for Coca-Cola and if it works for Geico, it can work for you in the neighborhood that you serve. Myth number two, I don't want to appear opportunistic and sound like a vulture. Well, hey, there are a lot of big corporations that advertise things that have something to do with death. For example, here's the good hands people from Allstate. Leave love, not stress. What do you mean, leave love? Is somebody going somewhere? Like, is somebody going to die? Or how about this one from Snoopy? Life insurance, a small price to pay to protect your loved ones. Protect them from what? You see, they advertise. If these guys can advertise, if all these people can advertise, you should be able to advertise too. Myth number three, everybody knows who we are. Everybody knows we're here. Well, my answer to that is no, they don't. Even what I call a premier funeral home, the one that's been there forever, that everybody knows, the one that's the most trusted, the one that gets the most calls. People move. And that's just the way it is in today's environment. People move. This was a piece that was done by American Moving Services. And what they basically said was uh, about 18% say they've lived in the same area for 11 to 20 years. 21% said they've lived there in the same area for 21 to 30 years. But only 12% have lived in their hometown for 31 to 35 years. In other words, a lot of people have moved away and come into the market. And so, therefore, it's not always safe to say that everybody knows who you are. It's true. People move. And in advertising, it's very common. People forget, which is always a reason to advertise. That way, you are persuading, informing, and reminding consumers the benefits of using your firm. Myth number four, I don't advertise because I don't know what to say. Well, we can help you with that. My book, which is How Facebook Works for Funeral Homes, the whole back half of that book is about topics that you can use to advertise your funeral home. And we're going to be talking about those today. And myth number five, funeral home advertising is negative and depressing. Well, I can tell you when I first started my Facebook practice a long time ago, we were concerned about that. And as you'll see later on in today's seminar, there's no way that we would consider it to be negative by people who have been served by you in the past. And here's a perfect example of this. This is Green Funeral Home in um, Kentucky. And this was one of their first posts. And you can see 363 people liked or loved this post. And look at the comments that people made about this couple. They are absolutely the best. They are about helping people. Betty says, "Thank you for helping my family through more than one." Amy said, "The best. I'll never forget how well they cared for my dad." And Regina, she says, "Cannot say enough wonderful things about this couple." These are not negative comments. They are positive comments. There were 88 comments just on that one post. So I'm excited about bringing this piece to you. It's called How Advertising Works. And I'll tell you, I was in broadcasting for 25 years. I have a degree in television and radio. I've been around, but it wasn't until the last few years in broadcasting that one of the largest privately held broadcasters in America sat down with me and explained this in such a way it makes so much sense that it's now the way that we do our advertising for our clients. And when I buy television and radio, we use these four pillars of effective local advertising to help us best construct advertising programs for our clients. It's based on four things: reach, frequency, consistency, and copy. And like anything that has four pillars, like a table or a chair, if you remove one of the pillars, the table doesn't stand, the chair doesn't work, and the advertising campaign will fail. You have to do all four well. So write that down on your key thoughts paper. The four pillars of effective local advertising are reach, frequency, consistency, and copy. Are you writing that down, Michelle? Woo woo! Okay. All right. So let's talk about reach. Reach. How many people do you need to reach to be able to expand your business? And you see, most businesses, whether you're a funeral home or you're selling hamburgers, most businesses don't know this. We're going to tell you how many you need to reach. And to get to that number, you've got one thing you can base it on, and that's the CDC death rate. And so the CDC says the annual death rate is 867 per 100,000 citizens. That's babies to really old people and everyone in between. Now, that rate went up during COVID. It went down after COVID, and now it's beginning to normalize back to about that number. But you can go to our website, postandboost.com/reach, or you can just use your QR code right here. And there's a calculator on this page that will help you calculate the number of consumers that you need to reach. For example, if your firm wanted to do more than 250 calls a year, if you wanted to do a bigger number than that, you need to be reaching somewhere between 18 and 20,000 adults on a regular 30-day period of time to be able to effectively grow your business. So looking at this calculator, look at the number of calls that you currently do, and then see how many people you need to reach to maintain your production. And then where do you want to be? If you're doing 150 calls a year and you want to grow to 200 calls, then you need to consistently reach 12 to 15,000 people every 30 days within your demographic. Here's another example. If you wanted to do 300 calls a year, your advertising, your paid advertising, should reach about 20 to 22,000 people every month. So write that number down. How many consumers over the age of 35 does your advertising need to reach in a 30-day period of time? Write that number down. Okay. All right. Frequency. You know, you can't change the way somebody thinks without repetition. Seth Godin, who wrote the book, this book right here, This Is Marketing, what he'll tell you is trust is established with repetition. And so frequency has everything to do with repetition. How many times should you reach your target audience per month? Now, again, we're talking about the funeral business. So, this next section is what do you say? What do you say in an ad if we're talking about copy? And again, in the back of my book, you can find a number of topics that you can write about. And I'll tell you, when I first started working in the funeral business, and I started writing radio ads as an example, if you write a 60-second ad about a funeral home, what do you say? And what I was doing early on is you're trying to say everything. When they started, why people want to use them, who they can trust, and so on. It's impossible to cram everything into an ad. And so when we started working in Facebook, it was still complicated. And after about 5 or 6 months, I took all the ads that I wrote, printed them out, and actually cut the pieces of paper so that I had a small little strip for each ad that I wrote, and I started putting them in in stacks. I started organizing them, and what I saw was topics. And I can tell you, if you know a topic about something you're writing about, it is far easier to write an ad than if you're just going to write an ad about a funeral home. And so knowing the topic makes it easier to write an ad. Write that down. Put that down on your key thoughts. Knowing the topic makes it easier to write an ad. Here are some topics that we commonly use that are chronicled in my book. Funeral director branding. And think about it. If you needed to write an ad about a funeral director, who knows better what a funeral director does than a funeral director? And so these ads are all about branding funeral directors. There's Greg Jordan in Mattoon, Illinois. And here's copy. It's something as very simple as this. In the wake of a loss, you may need a shoulder to lean on. Ridge Funeral Home and Cremation Service and dedicated funeral directors like Carson Wright are committed to providing guidance, comfort, and support whenever it's needed. It's what we do for the families in our care. Simple idea. Branding a funeral assistance is the same idea. Maybe you have a retired member of the community who is now a funeral assistant. You'd be surprised at how popular these people are. Business managers, the people who meet with the public and customers after funerals, they're incredibly popular as well. Therapy dogs, comfort dogs, they're really popular. Here is an assistant funeral director branding ad. We are committed to service. Day or night, weekends or holidays, staff members like funeral assistant Francis Richardson are here to support you when called. Compassionately bring your loved one into our care. Smith Funeral Home of Florence, serving Florence since 1950. Make sense? Make sense? Pre-planning, it's always amazing to me. You run a pre-planning ad and people call and want to meet to pre-plan a funeral. We use graphics that look like this and copy that reads like this. Life insurance is a safety net for your loved ones. Pre-planning your funeral is too. Call our funeral home and pre-plan with funeral director Kelly Smith. In this case, they have a learn more link and they actually have the ability to pre-plan online. The benefits of being family owned for those that are family owned, consider that to be a advantage to their firm. Topic 6 is cremation services. We use the phrase cremation options because consumers do not really know all the options that they have. You do. And you understand that it's important for them to meet with a funeral director so they know what those options are. Traditional cremations is a newer topic that we're using. The words kind of go like this. The sights and sound of the funeral are all the same. It's just that there's no graveside service. Now, of course, there can be, but you get the idea with the concept of traditional cremation. And then we have some clients that do pet cremations. In fact, we have a TV ad running right now for a new pet cremation service in North Carolina. Your facility, a lot of people may have seen the outside, they may have never seen the inside. And so showing staff members with the background being your beautiful funeral home, these are very effective ads. Here's Adams Green in Virginia. Here's Memorial Funeral Home in San Juan, Texas. All right, so now I'm going to get into this section that I'm really excited about. I call it the consumer's journey to purchasing funeral services. And as I mentioned to you, I am writing this book, and what's interesting is, think about this: how many words do you have to write a book? And right now, I'm at 19,000 words, and I've got to write 6,000 more. So, so if it sounds hard, it is. So this is the consumer's journey. And what this is a visual of the sales funnel, the funeral sales funnel. So in any marketing or advertising project, campaign that you're doing for any business type, there's a sales funnel. And this sales funnel applies across all types of businesses. And so the funnel is awareness, interest, desire, and action. Of course, the awareness part of the funnel is the biggest because that's where the most consumers will be. And then the action part of the funnel, which is the smallest for funeral, it would be very tiny because, as you know, the number of actual calls or people pre-planning is kind of a finite number. So, but what this idea is that follows the journey of a consumer going through these four phases. And here's a key thought: if your funeral home is advertising, then you'll be reaching a large group of people in the awareness funnel, part of the funnel. If you're not advertising, well, then that's something else. The phenomenon that we're going to talk about has something to do with the power of your subconscious mind and the way that it works with respect to advertising. I always tell this story when I do a live seminar about the dream car. What dream car do you have? I spoke in Saratoga last August, and I asked this question, and somebody raised their hand and said, my dream car was a red Mercedes. And so my question was, if that was your dream car, did you buy it? And the answer was yes. And then I asked this question. I said, when you were getting ready to buy it, and then after you bought it, did you see that car everywhere? And the answer was absolutely. And what happened is that person that I was talking to, they imprinted on their subconscious mind their biggest desire, and that was they wanted to have a red Mercedes. So they saw that car everywhere. And as we'll go into today's webinar, there's actually a reason for that phenomenon. But I describe it as the power of your subconscious brain. And your subconscious brain, by the way, this is not a mindset episode, but if it was, I could talk for hours on this topic. But your subconscious brain, which is incredibly powerful, is dedicated to doing two things for you in your life. The first thing is keeping you alive, right? Does a pretty good job with that. But the second thing, and this is the part that most people don't get, is your subconscious mind is dedicated to bringing into your life what you think about most of the time. Let me repeat that again. Your subconscious mind is dedicated to bringing into your life what you're thinking about most of the time. My journey on learning about the power of your subconscious mind started from Oprah Winfrey. She introduced our family to the movie The Secret. And The Secret's all about the law of attraction. And the law of attraction is just one of the things that happens with the power of your subconscious mind. Write that down. Your subconscious mind is dedicated to bringing into your life what you're thinking about most of the time. What you're thinking about most of the time. Forbes magazine did a little metaphor on the power of the subconscious mind. They said, if the subconscious mind was as powerful as a Ferrari, then the conscious brain, the thing that we're using right now for today's webinar, would have the power of a skateboard. All right. So that's an interesting metaphor, but it's again, the subconscious mind is incredibly powerful in the role it plays in advertising. Psychology today says it like this. Imagine for a moment that your subconscious mind is like a giant filing cabinet, then repeatedly being exposed to radio ads, TV ads, Facebook ads, billboards with key messaging. Imagine this could influence decisions towards the advertising product or service. Imagine that advertising working. So the awareness phase of the funnel, that is going to be the largest group of consumers. And in the awareness phase, I always ask this question. Do you think somebody's going to consciously read or remember your ads? And the answer is going to be no. They're not going to consciously read or remember your ads. I mean, if they have an interest in your business, the interest is going to be passive. The point is they're being exposed to your advertising during the awareness phase. But the benefit of advertising when a consumer is in the awareness phase is you are establishing an equity position in their mind. And if you're the one doing this and others are not, then that's a competitive advantage as you go along. The interest phase is when things start happening a little bit different. The interest phase may begin with somebody having uh, a milestone birthday. They turn 60, and all of a sudden, for a moment, they're thinking about mortality. So, birthdays and milestones, especially as people get older, are reminders of what's coming next. And so that could be a reason that a consumer gets interested. Another reason could be is something's happening to someone that they know. It's not to them, someone that they know. Maybe they went to a visitation or a memorial service. Maybe when they were checking out an obituary on Facebook, they went to their website and read the website. And while they were there, started to look at some of the other services that the funeral home provided. And the key thought is, again, in the interest phase, the consumers are not going to actively watch, listen, read, or pay attention to your advertising. Okay? It's when they hit the desire phase, that's when it all changes. And the way I always say it in my book is if a consumer hits the desire phase of the sales funnel and you're not advertising in the awareness or interest phase of the funnel, it might already be too late. In other words, when people hit the desire phase of the journey, that's when they're starting to formulate who they're going to do business with, who they're willing to trust. And they go through a number of thought processes. One is shock. In other words, if it's something about the actual consumer, if the consumer's been getting information like they have 6 months to live, there's going to be a shock factor during the desire phase. And so the user actually has to go through some level of acceptance before they start beginning to think about purchasing funeral services. But desire is when they begin to formulate who they're going to do business with. And here's the thing, just like the dream car, and the dream car is called the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. This was discovered actually in 1977 by three psychiatrists. And the paper basically says, why do we keep noticing certain things more often? And the answer is when the consumer is entering the desire phase of the sales funnel, all of a sudden they start seeing advertising everywhere. They're paying attention to ads just like they saw the red Mercedes. And so when they're in the desire phase, that's when they're going to read, listen, watch, or actively engage in your advertising. So when consumers think about your funeral home and they reach the desire phase, what pictures will they see of your funeral home? And that's a key thought. For our clients, they see a lot of pictures of the funeral home, a lot of pictures of staff members, people that they can know and trust. And of course, the action phase is when they actually will make a call. They'll click something, they will fill out a form, or they'll make a phone call, or they'll physically drive to the funeral home. We've seen people, one of the things in our book, we talk about funeral buyer types. And one of the buyer types is what we call the panic buyer. This is the person who shows up in your funeral home just out of nowhere, Somebody has just died. They walk in and you tell them your pricing, and then they go into shock. And then they run outside and they get in their car and drive away. So the action phase, though, is when actually somebody is going to be contacted, there's going to be an agreement, and services are going to be provided. So, simple question. If your advertising is reaching 10 to 25,000 consumers 4 to 6 times a month, what will they do when it's time to take action, when they enter the action phase? Well, they could either go to Google and search on keywords like cremation services or funeral homes near me, or what we want them to do is search for your funeral home because you are the only and obvious choice. Well, thanks for being with me so far. We've just got a little bit more to go. I want to talk to you a little bit about Facebook. Facebook is the biggest media in your local market. And one of the things we talk about is effective local advertising on Facebook. This is the kind of advertising that's designed to expand your visibility in your community, expand the reputation of your brand, and hopefully expand your business. So I want you to write this down. Facebook reaches 70% of your local market. 70. There's not a TV station, radio station, nothing that reaches 70% of your market, as one media does called Facebook. And what is Facebook? Well, I look at the newspaper as a historical guide. This is the newspaper industry, and you can see in the year 2000, the newspaper industry sold $67 billion in advertising. By the way, Facebook is well over 150 billion advertising in sales. But here's the newspaper industry, 67 billion in sales. It was big. And everybody got the newspaper. Getting your picture in the newspaper was a big doggone deal. This is my picture, and I'm hanging onto this thing like grim death. That picture is 56 years old. Me in the paper, but I still remember. Everybody at my school saw it. Everybody at the grocery store saw it. Everybody that worked with my mom and dad, they saw it too. Why? The newspaper was ginormous. It was big. Remember how thick it was and how tall it was? Some markets it came twice a day. It's why we recycle. Now, if you talk to the sales department at the funeral homes, they would tell you the most read pages are going to be things like the sports department or the business section, or maybe the lifestyle section on the weekend. Sorry, it wasn't. The biggest page in the newspaper was the obituary column. You just can't sell recliners on the obituary column. Why was the paper so big from the obituary column so big? It was powerful local news. And it still is. It's powerful local news. The other thing about the obituary column that was important to funeral homes was it was a daily market survey. In other words, it showed consumers which were the most popular and most trusted firms and which were the ones that were not the most popular and most trusted firms. And so it was essentially an ad. It was a big ad, but because it wasn't a blatant ad, it was a subliminal ad, it gave a tremendous amount of sway to those bigger firms in your market. Well, what happened to the newspaper? I mean, it's gone. And the obituary column that was with the paper, it's gone too. What happened? Go back to the graph. Think about this. In the year 2006, Facebook started. 2006, Facebook started. And in 2007, the invention of the year was the iPhone. So what happened? Looking at the graph, around 2006, the newspaper advertising sales went to you know where in a you know what. Why? Why? It's because they lost readers. They lost readers. And where did they go? They went to Facebook. And that's where they still are today. Facebook is the newspaper. That's the way to define what Facebook is in today's media mix. Facebook is the newspaper. So write that down. Facebook reaches 70% of your local market, and Facebook is the newspaper. Okay, so how to be known, how to be trusted, and how to be celebrated on Facebook. This is going to be a little snapshot of how I started my business. I met with Paula Lau about 7 years ago in Burlington, my second client. And we started talking about what kind of posts that we would put on Facebook. We had no idea what to do. I spent time with her husband, Jim. And Jim talked about his funeral home and helped me understand a lot about the process because, I was a broadcaster. I wasn't a funeral professional. One of the questions I asked Jim, though, was what made his firm unique? And without hesitation, he said it was his people. His people made his firm unique. And so we started taking pictures of people standing in foyers, people standing next to lecterns, people in visitation rooms, or people in chapels. And where Paul and I had some concerns about what we were showing, we had these conversations like, well, maybe we ought to do something that's fun or funny or uplifting that has nothing to do with funeral. And so we thought about that. And if we were doing that today on Tuesday, February the 27th, what would be a deathless topic, something that would be fun or levity or that would keep our name out there in social media? Well, it could be this one. Today, you may not know this, is National Strawberry Day. Or today's Retro Day. This is the day to bring out those old clothes and be cool. Or No Brainer Day. Those that did not participate in today's webinar are actively engaged in No Brainer Day. Well, here's what happened. We thought about that as an idea, but what we saw on Facebook is consumers were interacting with our content. It was like our own organic marketing stuff. We were like a market, like a focus group. And one of the things that I talk about in my book, and this is just a key thought, what I think or what you think is not nearly as important as what a consumer thinks. And what the consumers told us is that they liked our advertising, they were loving our advertising, and they were making all kinds of positive comments. What were they saying? They were praising individual staff members. They were expressing gratitude for services provided months ago, years ago, and they were just doggone thankful that they were there. And so what we figured out is Facebook users love their funeral homes. And so how hard is this? Use pictures of faces on Facebook. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. I showed this picture of Ann Williams at Coleman Heritage. I love Ann, and one of the benefits of advertising for Ann is she told us they have a beautiful funeral home, and it's the most beautiful funeral home in the market. So Facebook not only lets them show off that funeral home, but Ann told me this story the other day about how somebody just walked into her business and pre-planned a funeral, and when she asked him why, and this was a guy she had never met, he didn't know her, she didn't know him. The answer was, I see your face on Facebook all the time. We're wrapping up today's webinar. How to spend your advertising dollars wisely.